Welcome, Vintage Hollywood Archive. Bacall was famed for her raw honesty, as she said, "If there was one thing I had never been, it was mysterious. And if there is one thing I had never done, it was not talking." Why was Lauren Bacall so unfortunate with men? Make sure to watch this video until the end, and if you are new here, don't forget to join our wonderful community by subscribing to our channel. Lauren Bacall, a truly unique figure. She was more than just Humphrey Bogart's widow. "To me, a legend is something that is not on the earth. That is dead," said Lauren Bacall. However, she was always a legend to her followers, who witnessed her rise from a Harper's Bazaar cover girl in 1943 to a symbol of 1940s Hollywood glamour and a Broadway star. She co-starred in films like To Have and Have Not and The Big Sleep with Humphrey Bogart, who would later become her husband, and the couple remained together until he died in 1957. "My orbit is going to be full of Bogart, I'm sure," she once said. She remained dignified, intelligent, and outspoken throughout her career and beyond, despite her smoldering, seductive beauty. She was a truly unique figure, and one of the last greats of the golden age of Hollywood. Lauren Bacall, who died of a stroke at the age of 89, received 2 Tony Awards, an Academy Award nomination, and an Honorary Academy Award throughout her remarkable 70-year career. Despite being a vibrant, vivacious, and enormously skilled performer, she was never able to shake the stigma of being Humphrey Bogart's widow, much to her fury. Bacall was remembered to be tough and honest, but she was equally positive, as she once said, "You cannot always be a leading lady." Throughout her life, she faced numerous challenges, including an abusive and negligent father, the loss of her husband, and the following mistreatment of Frank Sinatra, who blew off their engagement after it was revealed to the press and then ignored her for the next 20 years. She has, however, always been a pillar of strength, full of character, and noted for her raspy giggle. Let's take a deep look at the life of one of the most iconic performers of the 1950s. Lauren Bacall was born Betty Joan Persk on September 16, 1924, in the Bronx district of New York, to Jewish parents from immigrant families. Shimon Peres, Israel's former president, is her first cousin, who was born in Poland. Her parents divorced when she was 5 years old, and her mother worked as a secretary and her father as a salesperson. Bacall and her mother later changed their last name to her grandmother's maiden name, Bacall, and added the second L. Bacall's father, William, was an alcoholic who left the family when Bacall was 6 years old. 5 foot 8.5 inches tall, Lauren Bacall was already out of school and started modeling, but was deeply self-conscious about the size of her feet. "I was a lousy model," she said. "I was this flat-chested, big-footed, lanky thing." However, she was quite exceptionally photogenic with her beautiful cat-like green eyes. The turning point came when she was 18 and Howard Hawks brought her to Hollywood for a screen test. Bacall was hardly even an actress at the time that she was discovered by the director. She was a model whom Hawks' wife, Slim Hawks, had spotted on the front cover of the magazine Harper's Bazaar. Bacall, not her resume, according to Hawks, ended up at his office due to a misunderstanding. He disliked her high voice when he first met her and advised her to change it to a throaty purr. She walked away, worked on her voice, and returned with a smoky, sensuous growl, demonstrating the steely determination that characterized her entire attitude to life. Hawks gave her the screen name Lauren Bacall, which she hated, and informed her that he planned to cast her opposite Cary Grant or Humphrey Bogart in a film. "Cary Grant? Terrific," she replied. "Humphrey Bogart? Yuck." But it was Bogart, and she made her cinematic debut beside him in To Have and Have Not in 1944. Working with the great movie legend, 25 years her senior, caused her to shake so badly with nervousness that she discovered the only way she could control her shivers was to lower her chin to her chest, keep her body rigid, and look up at him through her eyelashes. The effect was so seductive that it was quickly dubbed the look in Hollywood, and columnists hailed her as the great new sensational symbol, describing her as slinky, sultry, sensational. In To Have and Have Not, Bacall gave Bogart as good as she got. The famous line in the famous scene of the movie is, "You know how to whistle, don't you, Steve? You just put your lips together and blow." Bogart was married to his third wife, Mayo Methot, but it was clear that he and Bacall were madly in love off-screen as well as on. They were having an affair within 3 weeks of meeting, and Bogart divorced his wife and married Bacall 7 months after the film premiered. He was 45 and she was 20. After To Have and Have Not, the couple starred in 3 movies together: The Big Sleep, Dark Passage, and Key Largo, and went on to have 2 children, Stephen in 1949 and daughter Leslie, born in 1952. Bacall was known as Boogie's baby among the public and fan magazines, and theirs was one of Hollywood's great love stories. He was a lifetime womanizer, a big smoker, and even heavier drinker. And why Bacall understood how to handle him, matching him drink for drink, cuss word for cuss word, and standing up to him in every slanging match. The marriage was far from perfect behind the scenes. Bogart had an affair with his secretary, Verita Bouvert Thompson, 2 years before he met Bacall. Throughout his marriage to Bacall, he maintained his contact with Verita. Bogart's personal assistant, bartender, and hairdresser, Verita accompanied him on his journey. In her 1982 memoir, Boogie and Me, A Love Story, she said that she slept with Bogart's hat beneath her pillow. The nearly bald actor disliked wearing a hat, but she used to remind him, "You look like hell without it, old man." The writer Dean Shapiro, one of Bogart's friends, said, "The Boogie and Bacall myth wasn't really what it seemed. They were supposed to be this great Hollywood couple, but Boogie was carrying on with Verita on the side." Verita shared Bogart's passion for sailing and drinking, according to Bogart's friends, and their relationship frequently left Bacall stranded. Bogey allegedly called Verita from his deathbed, according to Verita. Verita opened Bogey and Me, a piano bar in New Orleans, in the late 1980s. She refused to leave her home when Hurricane Katrina hit the city. "Lauren Bacall failed to chase me out of Hollywood," she said defiantly. "Katrina won't force me out of New Orleans." If Bacall was aware of the affair, she chose to ignore it. She possessed a temper similar to Bogart's. She and Bogart were both formidable characters. They traveled to Washington in 1974 to take part in large political protests in support of the Hollywood 10, who were being labeled as communist sympathizers by the film business. The major studios were shocked by their outspokenness, and Bogart was persuaded to remove himself from the uproar by publishing an article titled, "I'm No Communist," in the March of 1984 issue of Playboy magazine. Bacall, on the other hand, stayed defiantly silent, refusing to be told who she could or couldn't vote for. She was a lifelong Democrat who despised Richard Nixon. Bacall was at the height of her fame in 1953 when she co-starred with Betty Grable and Marilyn Monroe in the phenomenally successful movie comedy How to Marry a Millionaire. Bacall was trying to remain almost painfully honest in her autobiography, By Myself, regarding Humphrey Bogart's death from cancer of the throat and esophagus at the age of 57 in 1957, and about how unpleasant and irritable he was towards her during that final illness. She narrates her shock and despair at seeing Bogey's crushed body being carried out of the house in a body bag by the funeral directors in graphic detail. She placed a little gold whistle on his coffin at his funeral, in memory of their first movie's most famous phrase. For the rest of her life, she was devoted to him. When she was asked whether Bogart was really as tough as he seemed, she replied, "In a word, no. Bogey was truly a gentle soul." During that time, she was filming Designing Woman, which was Bacall's second film with Minnelli. Their first was Cobweb from 1955. And there too, she's stunning in a roiling ensemble cast. For Minnelli, Bacall wasn't just a strong or tough woman. Rather, she was an independent woman who made her way in the world with the power of the mind, the force of character, and determined ideas. In The Cobweb, she's an artist. In Designing Woman, she's a commanding presence in the New York fashion world, and the movie feels like going home. It's also a movie of romantic happiness that's shadowed by death. Bacall filmed it in late 1956, while Bogart was dying of cancer, and she wrote, "That movie was one of my happiest film experiences." She called it a godsend, adding, "It was a romantic movie, and I seemed to be constantly running towards Greg or away from him, so I had an emotional and physical release to compensate for keeping everything inside at home." For a long time after Bogart's death, Bacall suffered hardships in both personal and professional life. Bacall was only 32 at the time, and, strange to say, her career reached its decline at that moment. What was the problem? Simply, it was her independence and strength. Strong and independent female characters continue to be a problem in Hollywood, to the point where the concept has become a stereotype and a limitation. Bacall's appearance may have made a lovely black and white picture, but she was considerably more than the result of her seductive charms or acting ability. Bacall was a pioneer of plain speaking by being open and honest about who she was and what she believed in. A brave young lady who rode life's ups and downs with self-effacing dignity. You just learn to cope with whatever you have to cope with. The world doesn't owe you a damn thing, she said. Bacall was going head-to-head with Bogart, and almost no one else in Hollywood studios could stand up to her. She was supposed to play presidents and chief executive officers, as well as editors-in-chief and visionary directors. In her heyday, how many such parts existed for actresses, for real-life women? Bacall's career was secondary to her personality. Her greatness, her strong personal presence, and her diverse body of work carries a shadow of unfulfillment, if not tragedy, because she started early and stayed ahead of her time. However, she could find a way of filling that vacuum, and it was to indulge in a relationship with another superstar, Frank Sinatra. But when she made the mistake of telling the gossip columnist, Luella Parsons, that they were engaged, Sinatra was angry. He took back his marriage proposal and cut off all contact with her. Ava Gardner, Sinatra's ex-wife, who hated Bacall, called him up. "Don't tell me you were really going to marry her," she asked. "Hell no," he replied. "I was never going to marry that pushy broad." Bacall's own take on this public humiliation was characteristically spirited. "Frank did me a great favor. He saved me from the disaster our marriage would have been." When she was 4 months pregnant, she married the brilliant but alcoholic actor Jason Robards, perhaps best known for his part in All the President's Men in July 1961. Sam, their son, was born in December of the following year. From the beginning, their marriage was rocky and destructive. "I invited a few friends over to celebrate Jason's 40th birthday," Bacall remembered. "Jason showed up at 2 a.m., loaded. I grabbed a bottle of vodka, smashed it into the cake, and yelled, 'Here's your goddamn cake.' The marriage ended when I came across a letter written by him to his girlfriend. They were divorced in 1969. After divorcing her second husband, Jason Robards Jr., in 1969, Bacall lived primarily on her own. When Marilee Matlin told her good friend Bacall of her boyfriend's troubles, her response was as acidic as you can expect from Bacall. Clearly, Bacall knew by then that you don't need a husband to be happy. As she said, "I figure if I have my health, can pay the rent, and I have my friends, I call it content." For years, Broadway would claim her as the Great White Way as a habit of embracing difficult women. There, Bacall would prove her acting mettle, winning a Tony for Applause in 1970, which established her as a star independent of Bogart. That would turn into an Emmy-nominated TV movie a few years later. She was a tough behind-the-scenes performer who would lash out with a dragon-like ferocity if she believed another member of the group was intruding on her domain. She took a break during the London run of Applause, and Sheila Matthews, a British musical star, filled in for her. When Matthews committed the heresy of being photographed in the Star dressing room by a national publication, Bacall stormed back from her break and sat in the darkened theater watching her replacement. Afterward, she trudged backstage, summoned Matthews to her presence, and said, "Honey, you just played your last show." Kathleen Turner, the Hollywood actress who was often compared with Bacall, reportedly introduced herself to Bacall with the words, "Hi, I'm the young you." She found herself looking at a frozen, unsmiling, and impetuous mask. In 1996, appearing with Barbra Streisand in the film The Mirror Has Two Faces, Bacall was nominated for an Oscar. Everyone in Hollywood was sure she would win, but when she didn't, the camera zoomed in on her face. Her expression spoke volumes, all of them unprintable. In 1981, she again won a Tony for Woman of the Year, a role Katharine Hepburn, another iconic actress, had put her stamp on. In 2009, Bacall was last awarded an honorary Oscar in recognition of her central place in the golden age of motion pictures. Bogey's Baby still had an unfailing way with one-liners. Gazing at the gold statuette, she turned to the audience and growled, "A man at last." In her increasingly unsociable last years, she said, "A woman isn't complete without a man. But where do you find a man, a real man, these days?" Tumultuous, explosive, and eternally uncompromising, she was one of the last great movie icons of our age. And more than an actress, She was a symbol of the kind of woman those post-war 1950s-era housewives would dream of becoming, and that the feminist movement would lionize. Intelligent, independent, and yes, too much to handle long before Hollywood tried and failed to handle her. She was a spitfire from the start. There was never another Bacall in the past, and there will certainly never be another Lauren Bacall ever. A woman with a strong personality has little chance of finding an equal partner in life. This has always been the case, even in Hollywood. In this case, it's quite understandable why Claudia Cardinal had a policy never to have a romance with an actor. Watch this video.
If you know I'm the man, if you